The last couple years have been a pretty wild ride. I went from putting myself through misery and torment playing Call of Duty every single day to unlocking platinum trophies, where I also occasionally put myself through misery and torment. However, when it comes to my platinum trophy endeavors, the good memories definitely outweigh the bad. Because in the year 2024, I made it my sole mission to play and platinum as many incredible games as possible, many of which I experienced for the first time. And every year, I have made it a tradition, I guess you could say, to take every game I have platinumed and throw them on this tier list here. The categories being just boring, enjoyable, grindy, challenging, very hard, no diddy, and pure misery. 32 games, one ultimate tier list ranking. Check ball. Yes! Oh my God, we did it! Oh my God, this is it. That was it. Oh my God. Yes! The greatest to ever do it. Let's see. Up first, we have... Wait, how did that get in there? Holidays, in my opinion, are the most wonderful time of the year, full of happiness and joy and giving and all that sentimental stuff. But what if I told you it could get even better? What if I told you you could win a gaming console, a smartphone, a $100 Amazon gift card, or even $5,000 for that holiday shopping you've been putting off? Well, today is your lucky day because Raid Shadow Legends is celebrating Christmas in Teleria with a special mini game. All you have to do to enter the giveaway is download Raid using the link in the description of this video or scanning my QR code, then head to xmas.raidrpg.com, enter your Raid ID, and then start throwing those snowballs. Keep in mind, this has to be done with my download link specifically, and you have to complete the event within 24 hours of downloading the game. Once that's finished, you are eligible to win all of the prizes I just mentioned. 5,000 bucks, gaming consoles, smartphones, or in-game loot for Raid Shadow Legends, including legendary champions. And speaking of legendary champions, check out these new winter style ones Raid just added, like Sir Nicholas. Freaking sick, dude. Jacked Santa Claus, who doesn't love that? They also have Tormund the Cold. This guy goes unnecessarily hard. I'm a sucker for a dwarf character, man. Or Whirlum Frost King. I mean, come on, dude. Raid always goes crazy with their character designs. This guy is tough. Don't miss out, guys. Be sure to download the game right now using my link, of course. Take part in the Xmas event giveaway and add those snowy champions to your collection. Keep in mind, when you download the game, you'll get a huge starter pack that includes the epic champion Hugo, another pack after reaching level 15 that has the champion Fane, and if you use promo code Monkey King, you can get the champion Sun Wukong for free up until January 7th. And if you have previously installed Raid but quit playing, I have another link in the description just for you that includes a welcome back bonus package featuring epic champion Tagore, available only through the separate link on mobile devices. And also be sure to join clan ROBMOB when you get in the game. My player name is IAmRob. Thanks to Raid for supporting this video. Now let's get back to it. So I did rank a lot of these last year, but I think my opinion on some of them has changed. So we're just going to start from scratch and re-rank all of them, even the ones from 2023. So with that being said, let's go back to where it all began, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Believe it or not, I do not hate this game. And as time goes on, the more fond my memories of it become. Don't get me wrong, the story is absolutely horrid up until the final act with the Isu reveal and all of that. But over the years, I've grown to appreciate Valhalla in a way. I think what I like the most about it is the variety of side content there is. I mean, it's definitely way too much side content, and a lot of it is pretty much only there just to give you something to do. But at least there's variety there. The legendary animal fights fights were pretty cool, and the little puzzles they have throughout the world were pretty fun. And I also love the music in this game, and I thought the exploration was pretty good too. I really like Saxon England, even though it's way too much map. But I love Viking stuff, so I'm kind of biased. This game will always be somewhat special to me because it was my first platinum and the birth of this channel, so I could show a little love for that. The platinum, however, what a grind. There were like 700 or 800 collectibles in this game, and even if you speed run it, you're still gonna spend well over 100 hours getting the platinum. There's not necessarily anything hard about it though. There's no difficulty related trophies, so you can just play on a lower difficulty if you want, but the mental fortitude required to achieve 100% in this game is a challenge in itself. So for that, we're going to put it in grindy. And next up, we have Hogwarts Legacy. You know, this is a weird game for me because usually games tend to grow on me over time. I might play something and not really like it very much, but then months or years go by and I look back on it like, hey, that wasn't so bad. But with Hogwarts Legacy, it's been the opposite. Let me preface all of this by saying this game really is a love letter to Harry Potter fans. Hogwarts is amazing. The surrounding area in Hogsmeade is amazing. Flying around on that damn broom is amazing. It was very apparent that the creators of this game have a deep, deep love for the Harry Potter universe, and I do appreciate that. It's just when I look back on it, I don't remember anything memorable about the narrative. Like, at all. I don't even remember what happened in the actual story. I just remember the little goblin was the antagonist and I called him Hasbula. Had they put a little more love and effort into the dialogue and storyline, this game could have been my game of the year in 2023. But because that aspect of the game was so mediocre, it just drags it down a ton. And the platinum itself was pretty grindy from what I remember. There were a lot of side activities, many of which got very, very repetitive. It's not like it was another AC Valhalla or anything, but still, it was a lot. The game wasn't inherently hard though. Again, no difficulty related trophies here or anything. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember dying one time throughout the entirety of my playthrough of this game. But it is a lot of side content and collectibles to run through in this one, so for that, we're just gonna throw it in grindy. And that brings us to Jedi Fallen Order, one of the greatest Star Wars games ever created, and honestly, has an argument for the greatest Star Wars game ever created. I mean, it's a Star Wars Souls-like, essentially. How could that not be amazing? I love this game dearly. I love Cal Kestis. I love the gameplay. I love the story. This game has one of the best Vader scenes in all of Star Wars media. I could not praise it enough. And the platinum was very easy for the most part. If you do decide to play the game on the hardest difficulty, Grandmaster, you're going to be in for a rough experience. But I did this one before I started the highest difficulty nonsense. So I just played it on normal difficulty, I think, and it was a relatively chill experience. No! The only part about this game and this platinum I found to be obnoxious was just navigating the worlds and the maps. It was so confusing. Their map system felt almost impossible to comprehend at times. I was constantly getting lost trying to clean up the collectibles, and to get the platinum, you basically have to discover 100% of every single planet. And that was pretty frustrating to do. But even with that being said, that's not really enough to put it in challenging or even grindy. So I'm just gonna put it in enjoyable. And then next up, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Basically, everything I just said about Fallen Order, but better. I think this game takes the foundation Fallen Order set and just runs away with it, makes it even greater. The inner conflict within Cal, trying to choose between good and evil, the plot twist in the final act, the freaking Vader scenes. My God, man, this game was peak Star Wars. And honestly, had it launched in a better state, had it not been a buggy frame dropping mess at launch, Jedi Survivor would have had a real shot at Game of the Year. The platinum for it was a little more demanding than Fallen Order. There was a lot more ground to cover and planets to discover, but they did improve the map and navigation system a ton. They added fast travel and a few other quality of life changes that made moving around a lot less of a slog. Again, this platinum would be hard if you did it on Grandmaster, but I did not. So we're just gonna put it right next to Fallen Order in enjoyable. Ghost of Tsushima. Oh man, you know, this is one of those games that you just wish you could erase from your memory and experience for the first time again. This story is peak. The open world is one of the prettiest, most immersive open worlds I have ever seen. Jin Sakai is one of my favorite video game protagonists ever, and this combat is unbelievably satisfying. I've heard a lot of people call Ghost of Tsushima overrated and an overglorified Ubisoft game. And honestly, I usually don't let the opinions of strangers on the internet have a negative impact on my life, but when I hear this take, it literally ruins my entire day. It's blasphemy. Now, this was my 5th platinum trophy. And the first one I decided to do on the hardest difficulty, which is lethal difficulty in Ghost of Tsushima. And for those of you that remember that playthrough, you will recall that I had a lot of struggles getting through it.
Already your legend.
But honestly, in hindsight, it wasn't that bad. The platinum itself is extremely easy. You basically just beat the game and complete all of the collectibles and side activities, all of which were very fun and not at all repetitive, in my opinion. The only difficult part about this game is the fact that I was playing on lethal difficulty. But looking back on it, I'm not sure it was as difficult as I initially thought, especially when I compare it to games that I've conquered since then. So for that reason, I'm not gonna put it in challenging. I'm not even gonna put it in grindy. I'm gonna put it in enjoyable. And next up, we have Spider-Man 2018. Or actually, no, this would have been Spider-Man Remastered, the one with the fake Peter Parker. I feel like Spider-Man 2018 is just, it's one of those games that's stained to my memory. I remember what I was doing the day this came out. I had just worked a night shift the night before, and I woke up early. I only slept for like 2 hours. I woke up early, drove to GameStop, and bought a PS4 just to play this game. And it was worth every penny. As many of you know, I'm a huge comic guy, big Spider-Man guy, so this game it's very special to me. One of my favorite Spidey stories ever. The combat and swinging was just, it was absolute perfection. And the character designs were damn near flawless. I love the sequel to this game, which we will talk about later in the video. And I think it was a major improvement on the gameplay side of things, but in hindsight, I don't think its story was near as impactful as the story in this game. That ending was just heartbreaking, man. The platinum for this one is also very, very easy, just like all of the Spider-Man games. I did do it on the hardest difficulty, which is ultimate, I believe, in this one. But even with that being said, I don't recall having any issues getting through anything. It's simply beat the game and do all the side stuff. That's basically it. And I also did all of the DLCs as well, which were also very straightforward. So it's safe to say we have ourselves another enjoyable. Bum, 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 bum. Sorry. God of War 2018. This is where it all started, folks. This is where I became a maniac. God of War 2018 was my first exposure to the God of War universe, and I absolutely fell in love with it. From the second that first boss fight with Baldur started, I knew I was in for a wild ride. And the platinum itself is very easy to obtain if you want it, unless you're like me and decide to do it on the hardest difficulty. Give me God of War. Genuinely, people do not talk enough about how hard this difficulty is. At this point in time, I have done a lot of harder games, a couple of Souls games included, and I found Give Me God of War to be on par with most of the harder games I've done. I died over 600 times during that platinum run, man. Now, granted, I was just getting into harder games, so I'm sure I've improved a ton as a gamer since then, but still, bro, it was crazy, bro. The final boss against Sigrun the Valkyrie Queen was a canon event in the ROB cinematic universe, and the first time I ever spent more than 50 attempts on a boss. It was absolute insanity. Like I said, if we were just going off of platinum alone, I would put it in enjoyable for sure, but because I did it on Give Me God of War, I'm gonna put it up here in very hard, no diddy. And that brings us to Spider-Man Miles Morales. Man, I love this game. Whenever they decided to introduce Miles in the Insomniac Spider-Man universe, I was a little bit skeptical, just because I've never liked the idea of Peter and Miles coexisting. I like Miles and I like Peter, but I just didn't see how they were going to make them exist together, like a Batman and Robin sort of thing. But I was definitely mistaken. Miles Morales does a great job of introducing Miles as the Spider-Man 2.0, so to speak, giving him his own battles to fight, his own villains to conquer, without having to lean on Peter and what he has going on in his Spidey world. I love how it's a lot smaller in scope compared to what we typically see in a Spider-Man game or movie. It isn't necessarily about saving the world or even the city, but it's just a kid in Harlem trying to save his neighborhood. The gameplay takes the foundation that Spider-Man 2018 laid down and makes it even better. And I, to this day, think Miles is a lot more fun to play as than Peter. This game really is a gem, and I actually think it's the first game I ever played on PlayStation 5, so it's kind of special to me for that reason. And the platinum, just like the other two Spider-Man games, was incredibly easy. Again, just beating the story, doing the side stuff. It was a little bit short for my taste, but still not boring at all. So we'll just throw it in enjoyable. And from there, we moved on to Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. If you have been around the channel for a while, you know I adore the original MW2. But the thing is, I adore the original MW2 mostly for the memories I had on multiplayer, not necessarily the campaign, which is all that's included in the remastered version. I do think the MW2 campaign is one of the best in the series, if not the best. It has the most likable protagonist, the best villain of the entire franchise, and a great variety of missions that don't feel like they repeat themselves. This game turned boys into men.
One less loose end.
Tripping, bro. You tripping.
This is where boys became men. No! But I really don't think they should have released this without the multiplayer. I judge Call of Duty's based on the entirety of the game, all the game modes it has to offer. And this one was missing 2/3 of what the original game released with. So because of that, it simply did not hit the same as the OG. But I would be lying if I said this platinum was boring or easy. Yes, this is only like a 15-20 hour platinum, I think, but in order to achieve it, you have to beat the game on veteran, which is no easy task. There were some missions here that made me want to rip my hair out. There were also some time trials on the obstacle course you had to get through that were also pretty rough. So it's only fair that it goes in challenging. And next up, we have The Last of Us Part 1 Remake. One of the greatest video game stories ever told. A true narrative masterpiece. This one for me, it was a lot like God of War 2018. It was my first exposure to the series and I loved it from start to finish. As a father of a little girl myself, it really hits home for me. Hard. And even though I'm not really big on this genre of game, the survival, horror, third-person shooter sorts, it still managed to resonate with me enough to make its way to one of my all-time favorites, just off of the story alone. And again, this is a very easy platinum if you want it. Play through the game on whatever difficulty you want, get the collectibles, that's it. But if you do it on grounded difficulty, that's another story. Grounded difficulty is quite frankly a miserable experience. Not only do you die in like 2 bullets, but you also are constantly having to get through encounters with minimal resources. You basically never have any bullets or anything because on grounded, the game doesn't give you any. I would go into encounters with nothing but a roll of duct tape and 1 bullet sometimes. It was awful. It's definitely not for me. I would much rather just fight a really hard boss or something. Definitely one of the lesser enjoyable playthroughs I've done as far as difficulty goes. I don't know that it's as hard as Give Me God of War, but for me personally, I found it to be just as, if not more miserable. So I'm gonna put it in very hard. No diddy. Bum, 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 bum. Sorry. God of War Ragnarok. Oh man, what an experience this game was. A massive improvement from the 2018 game in almost every way, in my opinion. Better story, better combat, better exploration, better everything. A lot of people disagree with that take, but whatever, I don't care. The platinum for this game was almost identical to the first. And again, very easy, unless you're on Give Me God of War. I did feel like Give Me God of War was nerfed hard in Ragnarok compared to the first game though. The enemies were a lot more forgiving and there were a lot less cheesy enemy encounters in this one. I think Santa Monica might have felt a little bad about what they put us through in 2018. I thought the Berserkers were a lot easier than the Valkyries were, and the final boss Gna was way easier than Sigrun. Like, astronomically easier. But regardless, it was still Give Me God of War. It was still no walk in the park. I don't think it was as hard as 2018, so we're just gonna put it in one category below in challenging. And then I made my way to Assassin's Creed Mirage. This game is the definition of mid. It isn't bad. Ubisoft made a solid attempt of going back to the roots of Assassin's Creed and getting away from the massive open world RPGs the previous three ended up being. I actually think they did too good of a job because just like Assassin's Creed 1, this game was boring as shit. Basim being the protagonist of this game was a fatal error, in my opinion, especially when you already know his outcome in Valhalla, and quite frankly, I just don't find him to be that interesting. The story itself was decent at best, very predictable plot twist at the end, very cliche antagonists throughout, and the worst part of all, the AI in this game is atrocious. Even on hard mode, they are just completely oblivious, man. It's actually pretty funny. It's so dumb. Obtaining this platinum was a very underwhelming experience, I would say. There was nothing too hard, nothing I would even consider grindy, to be honest. And the game itself just doesn't have an intriguing enough narrative or compelling enough gameplay to consider it enjoyable. So we have ourselves our first boring. And next we got Spider-Man 2. I don't know why, but for some reason it's become trendy and cool to hate on this game. Like on Twitter, we have legitimately seen in real time people turning on Spider-Man 2. What is wrong with y'all? I think the only thing about Spider-Man 2 I find disappointing is that it is a little bit on the shorter side. I would have preferred something closer to 30, 35, even 40 hours for the platinum, but instead it was around 20, 25. But I don't think that necessarily makes it bad. A game's length doesn't dictate whether or not it's quality. It's about the experience you get within those 20 to 25 hours that decide whether or not it was worth $70. And in my opinion, it was worth $70. Although I don't think the story was quite as good as the first game, I do think it was exceptional. With so many twists and turns and major reveals, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning playing through this for the first time. Overall, I love Spider-Man 2. I will never turn on it. The platinum was really easy, even easier than the first two, but not boring. So another enjoyable.
This is how it happened. This is how the Batman died.
This is where shit started getting silly. Batman Arkham Asylum. Let me preface everything I'm about to say by saying this. The Batman Arkham games are perhaps my favorite video games ever created. I am a Batman snob. I have read Batman comics my entire life. There is not a single piece of Batman media I have not consumed. I assure you, I love Batman. And again, these games are dear to me in ways that no other games ever will be. But let me just say, I hate these fucking platinums with everything inside of me. What makes the Arkham games so tough to platinum are these freaking combat and predator challenges. You have to get 3 stars on every single challenge map in the game. The combat maps requiring you to achieve a certain score, which can be tough, and predator maps requiring you to take down every enemy in the room using stealth, but in certain ways. It's miserable. Oddly enough, I literally just platinumed this game again like 2 days ago because my 5-year-old son is now into platinum trophies and he wanted me to do this one for him. Basically, bro didn't do anything. I had to do everything. And honestly, Arkham Asylum, it was just as unfun as I remember it being. Now, this game is not close to as bad as Arkham City or Arkham Knight, but it's still not an enjoyable experience at all whatsoever. So I'm gonna throw it in challenging. I didn't forget. I'll never forget. This was one of the most miserable platinums I've ever done. Again, I love Arkham City. I love these games, but the process of unlocking this platinum was a pure and total wasteland of agony. But it wouldn't have been near as bad if I didn't do all of the DLC trophies. Sure, you have 400 Riddler trophies to grab, but the combat and Predator challenges with Batman aren't really that terrible. But to get all of the DLC trophies, you have to get all of the stars in every single map with every DLC character. My God, what are you doing? This is by far one of, if not the toughest 100% completions I have, and definitely my proudest. Extremely unfun. Do not recommend. And speaking of unfun experiences, we have now arrived at Batman Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight may not have been as bad as Arkham City, but it was still a shit show. There were like 200 less Riddler trophies, and you didn't have near as many combat and Predator maps to do either, which was by far the worst part of City. But you do have Batmobile races to do and a handful of DLC trophies to get. The worst of them being the Community Challenge Pack. These were unreal. A couple of these trophies basically required you to get through all 4 rounds of a specific combat challenge without getting hit and having a perfect combo with 4 separate characters. This broke me in ways I will never be fixed.
Oh my God, we did it. Oh my God, we did it. Oh my God, we did it. We did it. We did it.
I think I've said this before, I don't think Arkham Knight's Platinum is overall as hard as Arkham City's, but I do think Arkham Knight has specific trophies that are harder than anything that's in Arkham City. I hope that makes sense. But even in hindsight, I still think this is as hard as I remember it being, and definitely harder than Give Me God of War and The Last of Us Part 1. So we have ourselves our first pure misery, folks. All right. We're finally caught up. Now we can move on to the games I platinumed this year, 2024, starting with Elden Ring. For those of you that are new to the channel, basically what I do is every 100,000 subscribers, I platinum a FromSoft game. I spin a wheel and whatever it lands on, that's what I platinum. At 300K, I'll be doing Dark Souls. At 200K, I did Bloodborne. And at 100,000 subscribers, I did Elden Ring, my first FromSoft game ever. And boy, oh boy, was it an experience. I really didn't know if Elden Ring was going to hit for me initially. I attempted to play it once before, but honestly, it just wasn't my cup of tea. And upon revisiting it, I'm not going to lie, I still kind of felt the same way. I just didn't understand the appeal. That is, until I beat my first boss.
Come on. Oh, we got him. We got him. We got him. We did it. We did it. We did it.
The thrill of overcoming a tough boss that you spent hours trying to beat, it was absolutely invigorating. Between that and the beautiful open world and addicting exploration, I was absolutely hooked. And it went on to become one of my favorite games ever. But how hard is the platinum? Well, I mean, it's as hard as you want it to be. Pause. Elden Ring is a strange game to gauge difficulty on simply because of how much versatility it has. No 2 Elden Ring playthroughs look the same. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of builds and strategies. And the game can really be as hard as you make it. You can do a strength or a dex build and use no summons or magic or anything. 1v1 every boss with little to no room for error and have a pretty miserable time. Or you can use more forgiving builds and use Mimic Tear or other summons and breeze through most bosses. So for me personally, this was my first Souls game. I didn't really know what I was doing. I used the dex build and I crushed Mimic Tear like crazy. The only hard boss I did not use Mimic on was Melania, who I beat fair and square just to prove I could do it.
Extraordinary. The mom.
Because you know how it is. Everybody's in the chat crying about me using Mimic Tear. So, you know, I had to let them know. I had to let them know I was like that. But I did manage to beat every boss in the DLC one-on-one, no Mimic, even though there were no trophies for that. I just did it for fun. So I would love to maybe go back one day and beat the game with no Mimic just to prove I can. But even though I did use Mimic a ton, I still found Elden Ring to be a very difficult game. Melania is probably the second hardest boss I've ever had to fight, second only to Radahn in the Elden Ring DLC. I don't think it belongs in the pure misery category though, simply because it doesn't have a whole bunch of missable stuff like other Souls games. So I strongly believe Elden Ring belongs in the very hard, no diddy category. Oh my God. Man, it's freaking hot, dude. I fucking hate cats. Guardians of the Galaxy. I will never forgive Marvel's Avengers for the irreversible damage it did to this glorious game. This game is so underrated, man. Guardians of the Galaxy is one of those games that everybody you know that's played it loves it. You never hear anything negative about it. But for some reason, it just didn't perform as well as it should have. I absolutely adored what they did with the Guardians in this game. They were similar to their MCU counterparts, but also pretty unique in their own way. I thought the narrative was just fantastic. There was so much Marvel lore intertwined in this game, a lot of Easter eggs, and the dynamic between all of the Guardians was incredible. And that 80s hit soundtrack playing during fights, I mean, come on, bro. Also, hot take, I love this Drax more than the MCU one. Fight me.
Stand back. I will breach the perimeter.
It's too thick.
It's too thick.
I think the only thing that holds this game back is the gameplay itself. They really missed a golden opportunity by not making all of the Guardians playable. I don't really understand why they made this decision, but you're essentially just forced to play as Star-Lord throughout the entire game, and you basically just shoot blaster guns at tanky enemies in every mission. It gets very, very repetitive, and by the end of the game, you're pretty burned out on shooting jello creatures with blaster guns. However, I do think the narrative itself and the relationships between the Guardians more than makes up for repetitive gameplay. And as far as the Platinum Trophy goes, it was not difficult at all. There were a few missables to look out for, and I won't lie, I'm pretty sure I had to do multiple playthroughs on this one because I didn't really feel like looking at a guide for the entire first playthrough and ruining my experience. There were also a good amount of collectibles here that I think were missable as well, but it was nothing crazy, so I think it's only right for Guardians of the Galaxy to go in enjoyable. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. Jesus, man, what an uncomfortable experience this game was. The Last of Us Part 2 is probably the most controversial video game ever made, to say the least. The direction Naughty Dog decided to take this narrative was polarizing, I guess you could say. There are basically two types of people when it comes to this game. There's those that loved it and those that think it's woke garbage. There is no in between. Personally, I'm more on the I loved it side. It's just a very strange game for me because although I think it's a tragic, powerful story that resonated with me personally in a lot of ways, it's also just not something I would ever want to play again. I understand why a lot of people don't like this game because it lacks a lot of the qualities a fun video game has. I completely get why a gamer wouldn't want to sit down on his couch after a tough day at work and play The Last of Us Part 2. It's sad. It's depressing. I understand wanting to tell a gut-wrenching story, but God, man, making your audience experience nothing but existential dread for 25 hours, that's certainly a choice. But story aside, let's talk about the Platinum. So the original Last of Us Part 2's Platinum is very similar to The Last of Us Part 1 Remake's Platinum. It's very easy unless you decide to play on Grounded. And I did the remastered version of the game on PS5, which had a lot of new trophies attached to it. You didn't have to do these trophies for the Platinum, but you know me, I'm a completionist. So not only did you have to beat the game on Grounded for a trophy, which was way harder than it was on the first game, but you also had a new roguelike game mode called a No Return. You basically had to get through different maps that had waves of enemies, and if you beat all waves, you moved on to the next map. And if you died, you had to start all the way over. And then you had something within this mode called a daily run, where you basically had one opportunity to get through all of the maps, and if you died, you couldn't attempt it again until the next day. And conveniently enough, there was a trophy in this game for beating a daily run on grounded difficulty. I kid you not. This is the only trophy ever that legitimately defeated me. I spent weeks trying to get this trophy. I got so close so many times. I would get to the last map, which always included a random final boss, and then die in the dumbest way possible. After a couple weeks, I finally just got tired of it. So I cheated. I used accessibility options to my advantage and made it to where enemies couldn't see me if I was prone, and I got slow motion every time I ADS'd, stuff like that. And the sad part is, I still almost lost with these options enabled. This is by far the worst trophy I've ever gone for, even worse than the Arkham Knight ones. I mean, it's the only one I ever truly gave up on and cheated. So for that reason, I'm putting it in pure misery. And from there, I moved on to Gotham Knights. This game makes me sad. They had such a great idea here, and I don't think it was all so bad. I love this game's Bruce Wayne Batman design, and honestly, I would have loved to see more of him, maybe even in a reboot. But even though they killed him off, I thought the Knights themselves were pretty enjoyable to play as. The Court of Owls were portrayed phenomenally here. I think they were definitely the strongest part of the entire plot. But to me, what held Gotham Knights back more than anything was just how shallow the gameplay itself was. They tried to make it not that way by throwing all these RPG elements and numbers at you, but at the end of the day, regardless of your build or who you played as or whatever, you were still just button mashing tanky enemies. And do not even get me started on the side content in this game. Horrendously repetitive and boring. But hey, I mean, at least riding around on your bat cycle was cool, I guess.
This might be the greatest video game ever made.
Also, side note, I thought the dialogue in this game was incredibly cringe. Overall, I think Gotham Knights is the definition of a 6 out of 10 mid-ass video game. In the platinum itself, although it wasn't very hard, it was still a slog to get through. So I don't feel bad about it. It's going in boring. Oh, baby. Now we're talking. Red Dead Redemption 2. Talk about a palate cleanser, baby. I think there are a couple of moments that define a man's life. The day he gets married, the birth of his first child, and the first time he played Red Dead Redemption 2. I not only had never experienced Red Dead Redemption before, I never played a Rockstar game in general before playing Red Dead 2. So this was a brand new world for me, and I adored every single second of it. The journey this game takes you on with the story of Arthur Morgan, it's truly one of the greatest stories I have ever experienced. Not just in video games, ever. That on top of one of the most intricate open worlds I've ever laid eyes on, Red Dead Redemption 2 is simply a masterpiece through and through. And it really makes everything you play afterwards look so inferior in comparison. When I beat this game, I was dangerously depressed for like a week. It broke me, man. But as amazing of a game as Red Dead Redemption 2 is, how's the platinum? Well, it's a doozy. I'll tell you that much. Red Dead Redemption 2 was by far the grindiest platinum trophy I have ever obtained, and it took me over 220 hours to get it. That is how long it took me to platinum all 3 Arkham games, twice as long as it took me to platinum Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and almost twice as long as it took me to platinum the entire Ezio trilogy. That is insane. This game has an absurd amount of challenges you have to complete throughout the open world, like winning mini games in ultra particular ways or shooting specific exotic animals, many of which were unbelievably rare. I spent literally hours upon hours looking for a panther and a moose. It was crazy. And then you also had the multiplayer where you had to reach level 50, which took me 50 hours to do.
Have you ever seen a broken man?
50 hours of mindlessly grabbing these little collectible cards because that was the most efficient way to get XP, while simultaneously having to deal with weirdos on the game griefing you along the way.
What are they doing?
this game. I freaking hate multiplayer trophies, man. Overall, Red Dead 2 is an amazing game that I love dearly, but I would never in a million years get this platinum again. It's not necessarily hard at all, but I feel like putting it in grindy would be an understatement. This game is so grindy, it's challenging, like a true mental challenge, a whole new level of grind. So because of that, I'm not going to put it in grindy. I'm going to put it in challenging. Now, at this point, I had crossed 200,000 subscribers, I had spun the wheel, and I moved on to Bloodborne. I might get some nasty DMs on Twitter for this one because I got some takes. I've been hearing for almost the last decade that Bloodborne is not only the greatest Souls game ever made, but also one of the greatest video games ever made in general. So needless to say, when I started my first playthrough, I had high expectations. And do you want to know what my thoughts on it were after beating it and platinuming it? Pretty good, but that's it. Just good. I don't know if it's just because the game was hyped up for me or what, but it just didn't hit like I thought it would. I mean, it's a very good game, don't get me wrong. Bloodborne to me is essentially the Jason Tatum of Souls games. Bloodborne fans are basically Boston Celtics fans. And then Elden Ring is Jokic or Giannis or Luka. You know, the best of the best in the league. Is Jason Tatum a good basketball player? Of course he is. Probably top 5 in the league. He could potentially win an MVP one year at his absolute best. But is he better than Jokic? No. Is he better than Giannis? No. Is he better than Luka? No, sorry. We saw it in the finals last year. His team was better. He wasn't better. Tatum is a great player, no doubt about it. But the issue is his fans are constantly trying to shove him in conversations he doesn't belong in. Bloodborne is very similar in this regard. It is a great game, but to say it's better than a game like Elden Ring, it's preposterous. It's good. That's it, it's just good. And as far as the platinum goes, it was definitely no walk in the park. The bosses, the DLC bosses in particular, were pretty tough. But even worse than that, the freaking Chalice dungeons, those were pretty brutal. But overall, I didn't find it to be harder than Elden Ring without summons. Like, not even close. And I don't even think it's harder than Lies of P, which we'll talk about here in a few. I just don't think it belongs in very hard. So this might be a hot take because a lot of people think this is a pretty hard game, but I'm gonna put it in challenging. And here we have Assassin's Creed 1. But Rob, that's not a platinum. I got all of the achievements. It's the same thing. This game is so old, it doesn't have trophies. Trophies were not a thing when this game came out. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this one, and I'm sorry for it, but I just don't think Assassin's Creed 1 is a very good video game. Sure, it was the first of a franchise that we all grew to know and love, but that doesn't make it good. In fact, I find Assassin's Creed 1 to be so unbelievably boring, I am shocked that it got a sequel. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad it did because I adore AC2 and a lot of the Assassin's Creeds that came after it. But AC1, oh my God, man, what a snooze fest. I do think there are a lot of redeemable qualities in AC1. I think the story itself and much of the dialogue that goes with it is top tier and even better than a lot of the slop Ubisoft puts out nowadays. But basically everything about the gameplay itself is just not it, man. Side content was abysmal. The collectible experience was not enjoyable in the slightest, and the combat, although it was somewhat fun for its time at first, did get pretty boring pretty fast. I know this all sounds pretty harsh for a game this old, but I mean, like, Halo 3 came out in 2007, man. It's not like this was exceptional for its time or anything. I remember vividly playing this game when I was 10 years old, and I thought it was boring back then. Overall, although I liked Altair as a character, and I do think AC1 had a solid narrative and did a good job of establishing the world of Assassin's Creed, I do not think this was a good video game as a whole, and unlocking all of these achievements was a snooze sandwich, man. Just boring. Ooh, baby. Lies of P. I have both great and horrifying memories of this one. Lies of P is a Souls-like version of the story of Pinocchio, essentially. And it is a great game that I highly recommend. I actually think it's one of the only Souls-likes out there, or at least that I know of, that could pass for a FromSoft game. Its quality is every bit as competitive, and in a lot of ways, I actually prefer it over Bloodborne. Yeah. I said that. I love all of the boss designs. They're all unique, and there really isn't one that feels like a reskin of a previous boss. Even though some of the bosses were absolutely miserable to get through. I still see that freaking swamp monster in my nightmares. I said this in my Lies of P Platinum video, but what really sucked about doing this game's platinum is it's one of the few experiences I've had where doing the platinum actually hurts your overall experience of the game. There are some tough platinums I've done, like the Arkham games, for example, that were very demanding, but the platinums didn't taint my overall experience with the games. Yes, they were hard, but at the end of the day, I love the games themselves just the same. But unfortunately, with Lies of P, that just was not the case. I think it was just because there is so much missable stuff you have to look out for in this game. It made getting through it extremely stressful, because if you miss one piece of dialogue or one little item, you'll have an entirely new playthrough on your hands. If I could go back and redo it, I would have just played through the game blind and then worried about the missables afterwards. Sure, it would have cost me more time, but it wasn't worth hurting my initial blind playthrough by constantly having to look at a guide on my other monitor. So I think this is a really, really good game, but the platinum is actually miserable, especially considering some of the bosses that were already pretty difficult felt damn near impossible on New Game Plus. I would really like to put this in very hard, but to be honest with you, I think it's harder than God of War 18, Last of Us Part 1, and Elden Ring. F it. I'm gonna put it in pure misery. I'm standing on business. Pure misery. Lies of P. Pure misery. Never again. And then we had a nice change of pace with Assassin's Creed 2. What a gem this game is, man. It was like a nostalgic blast in the past, experiencing Assassin's Creed 2 again. This was my first Assassin's Creed ever, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in like the 7th grade. I would play Halo 3 or Modern Warfare 2 with my boys on Xbox Live, and then when they got off, I would hop over on Assassin's Creed 2 and just play it till I fell asleep. I did that like every weekend. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit concerned that revisiting AC2 would taint my opinion of it. I had nothing but positive memories surrounding this game, and I was just worried that it wouldn't live up to the pedestal I had it placed on in my head. But oddly enough, that was not the case. I mean, sure, the game is clunky as hell. Some of the dialogue and character animations are beyond goofy, and its age definitely shows throughout a lot of the cutscenes. But at its core, I still believe this game has an argument for greatest Assassin's Creed ever. The story, in my opinion, is the best of the entire franchise. A young, angry Ezio Auditore seeking revenge for the death of his family. It was a simple, classic vengeance story, and I think it is entirely reasonable to say that the Assassin's Creed franchise we know and love really started with this game, not Assassin's Creed 1. I also thought this was the prettiest open world in the entire franchise. And the platinum itself was also incredibly easy. The hardest part of it was collecting all of the feathers, but even that was pretty chill. I did hate those little Subject 16 glyphs though. Those were ass and required way too much intelligence. Overall, amazing game, fun platinum. I'm putting it in enjoyable. All right, now we are on to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now, I understand for a lot of people, this game is the holy grail of the Assassin's Creed franchise. I get it. It's good. But I played it for what was essentially the first time this year, and honestly, I don't know. I will say Rome was beautiful. The gameplay was a massive improvement over AC2, and graphically, they really stepped their game up in an impressive way, especially considering the game only came out 1 year after the release of Assassin's Creed 2. And full disclosure, when I was about 75% through the main story, I was sure that this game was going to pass AC2 for me, but boy, oh boy, was I wrong. Because then I got to the final act, and the final act of this game is, it's rough. It's not necessarily about what happens in the end. Ezio has some pretty badass dialogue before killing the antagonist, and there's a huge plot twist with Desmond in the present day. All of that was sick, but the main issue was just the pacing. It was so painfully obvious that Ubisoft was on a tight deadline with this game, and the last 3 sequences or so really should have been like 5 or 6 sequences. So much happens with the antagonist, and they do so many time jumps. It just really hurts the overall flow of the story and makes the impact of the ending, at least for Ezio's story, pretty underwhelming. It was very jarring. to say the least. And then for the platinum, you do have a lot of collectibles and grindy stuff to do, but even worse than that, they introduced the 100% synchronization feature. Basically, you have to achieve 100% completion on every single mission in the game. All of the main missions and all of the side missions. This basically requires you to get through entire levels without being detected or without taking damage and stuff like that. It was genuinely miserable getting through some of these, and if you were in the stream for that tank mission, you know what I'm talking about. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually going to put an Assassin's Creed in challenging. And I guess we'll keep the Assassin's Creed train rolling because next up we have Assassin's Creed Revelations. This was also my first experience with Revelations in its entirety, that is, and for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I still don't think it was as good narratively as Assassin's Creed 2, but it was significantly better than Brotherhood, no contest. The ending was a perfect send-off to Ezio's character, and I absolutely loved the Altair flashbacks and the way this game kind of brings the entire series together. It was also a massive improvement in both the graphics and the gameplay, with a ton of new mechanics and equipment introduced, like the hook blade that made it feel fresh and innovative. But I think what I disliked the most about this game was the world and the exploration experience in general. I don't think I liked a single side activity in this entire game. It was all very, very generic, and it was actually pretty disappointing for me because I love the main story so much, and I thought they made so many improvements after Brotherhood. But man, the side missions and collectible grind were simply terrible, and it also just felt very weird going from Italy to Constantinople. I can't explain it, it just felt wrong to me. And then there was also this DLC where it's first person and it's basically a platformer, and it had a bunch of crazy ass trophies tied to it as well, like having to get through entire sequences without dying. It was straight booty cheeks, man. Overall, I do like AC Revelations. I thought it was a great conclusion to the Ezio trilogy, but the platinum itself, not very enjoyable, but not very difficult either, so I'm just gonna throw it in grindy. Shadow of Mordor. Sorry. I really enjoyed revisiting this one. I hadn't played it since it was released all the way back in 2014, so it was almost like playing a new game for the very first time. I am a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, so I was really in my element for this one. The entire concept of this game really is just so badass. You have this ranger, Talion, who's killed by Sauron's commanders, but he's banished from death, and he links up with Celebrimbor, the one who crafted the Rings of Power, and then they both set off together to kill Sauron's forces, brainwashing orcs and creating their own orc army in the process. Man, like, bro, they cooked. They cooked. The gameplay is also basically just the combat from the Arkham games, but Lord of the Rings with swords. I mean, could you ask for anything more? The platinum itself is pretty easy. There's no difficulty setting in this game, just one difficulty, so it's not too hard at all. But once you get into the DLC trophies, there are some doozies in there. Like, there were these timed trials I had to complete. You basically had to kill and brand a certain amount of orcs and obtain a certain amount of score in a specific amount of time. And if you failed, you had to start all the way over. I was using cloud saves and everything to make this shit happen. It was truly awful. One of them literally took me like 6 hours to get. It was so strange because the entire platinum was such a chill experience, and then the DLC shows up and just freaking catches you way off guard. But I don't think that's enough to call it challenging, although there's a couple DLC trophies that are very, very difficult. The game as a whole is very, very easy, so I'm just gonna go with a happy medium and put it in grindy. And now we move on to the only horror game I have ever platinumed or played in general, Until Dawn. This is going to be really hard for me to talk about or review because I have nothing to compare it to. This is the only horror game I've ever played. Until Dawn has a pretty cliche teen horror story, but I really enjoyed the game and the decision-based centric gameplay, so much so that I would love to play more like that in the future. I usually find the horror genre as a whole to be incredibly silly and predictable, but there were actually a couple plot twists in this game that really caught me off guard, and the jump scares ate my ass up, I'm not gonna lie. Overall, for the platinum though, I thought it was mostly pretty boring. After you get through the suspense of experiencing the main story for the first time, you basically just walk around and pick up collectibles for 10 hours. So yeah, good game, but a very boring platinum. Next up, we have the only platinum trophy I've ever done for fun and did not make a video on, Astro Bot. I enjoyed every second of this. With my 5-year-old son now being into platinums now, this was his first platinum ever, so it's very special to me. We experienced it on his account and then did it together on my account, and this game, this is an amazing game, man. I'm not big on platformers, and I wasn't a massive fan of Astro's Playroom, so it's safe to say I was pretty shocked when I played Astro Bot for the first time and fell in love with it. Being a PlayStation fan and playing this game makes you feel like a little kid again. All the little cameos from different PlayStation characters, it's incredible. Just imagine if Sony actually did something with those characters, though. Would be crazy. The gameplay itself is so simple, but so satisfying, like a modern-day Super Mario. I love it. The platinum itself is also really simple, but I wouldn't say it's entirely easy. A lot of the challenge levels in this game really catch you off guard, and the final challenge level took me like over an hour to beat. A lot of that's probably a skill issue, but whatever. But overall, even with the challenge levels, I don't think this game's difficult at all. It is incredible. I highly recommend. So we're just gonna put it in enjoyable. Ladies and gentlemen, we made it. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. My 31st platinum trophy, and in my opinion, the greatest video game I have ever played. Is some of that honeymoon phase? Probably, but I don't care. Many of you probably don't know this, but I actually read all of the Witcher books. Don't know if I mentioned that in my platinum video. It must have slipped my mind. But because of that, I became so invested in the world of The Witcher, and it really made my playthrough of it so much more special. And I don't know if I've ever had an experience with a game like I had with this one. I loved every second of it, every second of the main story, every side activity, aside from some of the miscellaneous trophies. Both DLCs were incredible, just through and through an amazing game. To get the platinum, you do have to play through the game's hardest difficulty, Death March, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, it's not hard. Like, at all. And I didn't even really use a lot of potions or signs or really any of the stuff in the game that makes it easier. Just a man and his silver sword kicking ass. There were a couple of tougher bosses in the game, but even those didn't take me more than a handful of attempts. The final boss in the Blood and Wine DLC was probably the hardest boss in the game, and even that, I think it only took me like 3 or 4 tries. There was only one singular DLC trophy I would consider hard, where you had to do this crazy ass gank fight essentially, but you can do it on a lower difficulty if you want to, as long as you already beat the main game on Death March. I didn't do that though, because I'm mentally ill. You just don't. As far as collectibles and side content goes, there was nothing too crazy with that either. The most stressful part of the process is probably getting all of the Gwent cards, but even that wasn't really a big deal because Gwent is pretty damn fun. And when side activities are actually fun, they don't feel grindy. You just do them and have fun. The platinum and all of the DLC took me around 150 hours to complete, so it's definitely no small endeavor. So it's kind of tough to rank this one. I wouldn't call it challenging because, as I said previously, the combat's not really hard. And it's also hard to call it grindy because also, as I just said, nothing in it feels like it's grindy. I am still playing this game right now, even after unlocking the platinum. I've never done that before with a game. That's just how good The Witcher 3 is. But then putting it in enjoyable feels like I'm doing it a disservice because it's better than every game I have in this category. F it. We make a new one. There we go. Sounds good to me, huh? Good with you? Good with me. And there we have it, folks. The updated ROB Cinematic Universe Platinum Trophy tier list. A lot of things changed. Some stayed the same, but overall, we had an amazing year. I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be hard to top it next year. I mean, we had Red Dead 2, Elden Ring, Witcher 3. I mean, like, How am I gonna beat that? What the hell am I supposed to play now? But regardless, as always, I appreciate you for watching the video. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you're brand new. 300,000 subscribers is right around the corner, so you know what that means. Dark Souls 1 Platinum. That'll be fun. I'll be streaming that entire playthrough, by the way, so be sure to turn those post noties on, go sub to my second channel, and follow my Twitch. Also, once again, thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for supporting this video. Be sure to download the game using the link in my description and participate in the free Xmas giveaway for some dope prizes. And if you're a new player, you'll get some insane bonuses with 2 epic champions.